Welcome Sagittarius to your in-depth monthly forecast for July 2024 for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the month. Now this provides some very important pointers of what we can expect immediately, but it's also a backdrop for the month in total. So we do need to take the start of the month's influences very seriously. And the thing we need to look at first of all, of course, is your ruler Jupiter. Jupiter continues in the sign of Gemini. So over the next year, through to June the 9th, 2025, a great opportunity to work hard and apply yourself around all sorts of connections and relationships to others. It doesn't have to be just confined to the romantic sphere. Building up goodwill is a very important commodity. But the thing is, with the start of this month, is Jupiter links brilliantly to both the Sun and also the Moon. Now, they themselves are in a sextile, so Jupiter splits them in what's known as a semi-sextile, 60 degrees. But it suggests whether you're working with people on finance, the 8th house, the Sun, Venus, which is the ruler of money, but also Mercury, very much about marketing and trade. If you're working on some kind of business arrangement, your ability to engender a good relationship, Jupiter, is important. But then if you're working on things that are more everyday, more to do with the domestic part of your situation or your life routines or where you work in terms of the processes, the 6th house, Jupiter supports the Moon there as well. So at home, if one person has been doing a bit more of the domestic chores, a great opportunity to rebalance things. Now, if it's you who tends to take on this responsibility, try to delegate. If it's somebody else who has been, working very hard, if you offer to take a few things off them, they'll likely be really delighted. But you can see we also have Mars and Uranus in house 6. Uranus has been in this area 4 times since March 2019, and probably it has felt at times a bit stressful because Uranus in the 6th house can affect our nervous system. The 6th house is health, and perhaps also things have been a bit edgy and unpredictable around your work. Now, Mars in the 6th house is giving you extra vitality and extra stamina, which is really good. But all of them, the Moon to the Sun, Mars to Venus and Uranus to Mercury, are forging great links to those 8th house players. Now the 8th house in a very pragmatic way can be about business, investment, long-term financial planning, shared resources, and also in a more psychological way it can be about transformations. So you could transform quite a lot this month, I feel, particularly using the energy of Jupiter as the pivot by working closely with people, whether it's listening to where they're coming from, encouraging, supporting, trying to build up a better understanding and communication, the 7th house. But that can work through the more practical parts of your situation, but also where you're most invested. And the other part of the 8th house can be intimacy. So it could be where you're very committed to someone in a romantic context. So to make that romance work better, it could be the rather unsexy parts of your life that by applying yourself to these more and using a bit of imagination with Uranus's help to try some different and fresh approaches can actually make things just work more smoothly, more efficiently, but that can improve that sense of rapport. So whether you're working in business with people and you see opportunities together, applying those opportunities in a systematic, detailed and disciplined way, those 6th house energies will give you a return but draw you closer to them. So heaps of opportunities at the start of this month, but I have to say at Sagittarius, they're not particularly sexy, or are they? Because you can see that Mars and Venus are in a sextile. Mars in the 6th house is a little bit more detached, I guess, but it is in the sign of Taurus, which really appreciates the more sensual part of life. It may be by giving, say, your partner or your love interest a nice healing foot massage or neck massage to relieve some strain, that can draw you closer through the conduit of both Jupiter relating, but Venus, where we can get closer and be more affectionate, but also manifest our desire in the 8th house. Or it could be offering to cook a meal for someone. 6th house, your preparedness to be a bit more self-sacrificing, again, can be celebrated by your partner. But if you are wanting to do something different with your resources, squeeze a bit more out of your assets, it might be worth talking to some advisors. And Jupiter on the 7th house cusp suggests you could get some good advice, whether it is from an accountant, a mortgage advisor, a financial broker, people who really understand the market and all the options. So the 6th house, often for Sagittarians, can be a bit dull. But for you at the start of this month, it's absolutely rippling with opportunities. How good is that? Now, over the last 15 months, if you have been making some adaptations at home, it may be home improvements, it may be some do-it-yourself tasks, it may be to do with having actually moved altogether, it may be that there's been some changes in terms of the family setup. You've provided extra support and care to someone older or younger. Maybe you have felt a little confined with some of these emotional demands or family demands, but also what you're being encouraged and nurtured towards with the help of Saturn, and you have been with Neptune since 2012, is to be more in touch with how you feel about things, which is not usually a Sagittarius strength. Because Sagittarians thrive on knowledge. You thrive on the big picture. So the Saturnian energy in the 4th house could be pushing you to look at some awkward parts of your emotional history. But also the 6th house energy is asking you to look at some details which you can find a bit dull. The 8th house is very much a deep dive and could lead to some big transformations. But again, it's not that 9th house energy that's very much part of your sign, which is about being free, independent, experimental, adventurous, a little bit flexing because of the mutability of your sign. It's quite deep stuff. So if you're prepared to apply yourself at the start of this month, some significant improvements can shape up, particularly with Saturn linking with Venus very well through the first week of this month. They're in a trine. So if you have really dedicated yourself to your family unit, to a particular person, to supporting the situation or transforming that property, you can start to see the progress. So all that very gratifying indeed. But that brings us to the 2nd of July, because then Mercury, the planet of communication, moves out of the deep house 8, where you've had your detective's mac on and you've been much more skeptical about what people say to you because you've been diving deep trying to unlock what they really meant. Mercury moves into house 9, which is your sister fire sign of Leo. To be honest, Mercury much prefers to be in Leo than it does in Cancer. Mercury benefits when things are logical, detached, precise, and communicative. The sign of Cancer can be quite emotional and therefore subjective around communication. So Mercury moving into your 9th house can trigger a desire for some of your more natural Sagittarian interests. For example, doing something spontaneously, breaking out, doing something to do with gaining some extra knowledge, signing up for a course, arranging a holiday, a trip, maybe thinking about foreign languages, playing a musical instrument. If you'd like to go to a college of higher education, perhaps in September, this would be a great time for you to really get the application moving in an earnest way. But Mercury moving through the 9th house can also reflect your love of higher knowledge. The big picture. If you ever meet up with Sagittarians, as I'm sure you have, in a bar and have a drink, the vast welter of knowledge that can be exchanged is really impressive. And that part of you that does like to talk about different things, philosophies, past experiences in terms of travel can really be evoked. It's just that Mercury goes opposite Pluto. And this does require some care because across the ninth and third house cusp, that's about communication. Pluto, the third house, your everyday communication. The ninth house, that big picture, but also the higher truth. For example, if some of the things that I've been describing in terms of opportunities are not working for you, how Mercury may fit your particular situation is arouse within you a desire to escape something that isn't working. Even if you've tried your absolute hardest to dive in, commit yourself, explore the options, try and get close to someone, if it doesn't feel right, Mercury's going to make you much more strongly aware of what really hits your sweet spot in terms of your higher truth. And that means you may have to have a difficult conversation. And it may be a conversation that isn't going to be easy. And that could trigger back a response. And that response can be very powerful. So do be prepared for some frank exchanges of views pretty early in this month with that move. But if you are wanting to do something that's much more free-spirited, Mercury moving into Leo is lovely. The fire of Leo really brings warmth to Mercury's interaction. But I would say if you do end up having that conversation with someone about the big picture, for example, we've got some big events happening in the early part of July. We've got obviously the British general election, but also we have the American Day of Independence, and that's a big celebration. And of course, there's a lot of discourse in both countries about the direction of travel. So you may find yourself having a bit of a tussle with someone who's just as determined to state their opinion as you are with yours. So just be conscious of that. Now on the 5th, we have a new moon. New moon's in Cancer. Can you get any better than that? Because the moon rules the sign of Cancer, but it is for you, house 8, very much transformational. The 8th house can see some things come to a close. And that's one of the painful realities of Western life that I don't think we find easy. We're much more caught up in what we can achieve, what's exciting around the corner. Very Sagittarian, if you like. But understanding that life is a process and has cycles, and some of those cycles do end in a dissolving of what we have to begin again, there is the possibility that a situation like that could manifest itself for you over the following month. But it does still have huge opportunities. Again, if you're open to the emotional dimension, which, as I've hinted at, Sagittarians can be a little bit wary of. But this one is in a T-square with the nodal axis. Now, this is very, very powerful because the North Node, the point of destiny, is in your sister fire sign of Aries. Very much about manifesting your individual talents, creativity, and love of pleasures. The South Node is in the 11th house. That's the part of your collective consciousness where you may have stayed rooted because it feels a bit more comfortable. So in a way, since last July, you've been asked to be more daring. And because the sign of Cancer can be about security, the 8th house can be where we're all in. If you're clinging on to something, and I'm not suggesting you are personally, but any of us, if we're staying attached to something that actually really we should be considering releasing because it's not making us feel secure, which is Cancer, it's actually trapping us because we're feeling needy in a way rather than giving ourselves the opportunity for liberation. Now, no sign understands liberation more than Sagittarians. So if there is a situation, even to do with a property arrangement, it could be that you have shared ownership of something, maybe you have more business interests where somehow or another you're in, but it's not necessarily something you feel comfortable about. That nodal axis could, along with Mercury in the 9th house, be seeing you finding ways over the following months to cash in and exit something that for you has fulfilled all it can do and it's run its course. So new moons aren't just all about opportunities. They can be about pushing us, particularly an 8th house new moon, to bring to a conclusion something that's come to the end of its life cycle. But on the 12th, Venus joins up with Mercury in Leo. Venus, if you recall, spent a long time in Leo last summer, and that gave you an opportunity to travel, meet different people, have some very fresh experiences. But this time it's going to be in its standard format, so the next 3 weeks is a chance for sure to enjoy some pleasant environmental experiences. So if you are traveling somewhere, of course, we can all enjoy having nice food and having a dip in the sea or being by the pool, but you might actually find that going to check out some local history and the cultural stuff just as intriguing. If you're not going overseas or somewhere further away, you may still want to go to galleries or go and watch a band or a show, something that really opens up your consciousness to how things are created in a more artistic way, very Venus. But also Venus moving into the 9th house can be very important about finding the higher truth in a romantic time. And because Venus is opposite Pluto, just like Mercury was, there could be a lot of intensity. You could meet someone at this time that you have an amazing connection with in terms of your ideas. So chat into those so-called wee small hours and really feel gripped. But it might not be something that's for the long term. It might be, but just be aware that 3rd, 9th energy, very mutable, very flexing, and it is about an exciting exchange. So it could be transactional. It's not so all in as the 8th house, where that new moon for Cancer is in a tie that's working well. So it can be flirty, essentially. So just be conscious of that. And a connection definitely possible, but also you could find some politics creep into a relationship if your belief systems don't match somebody else that you're aligning to. And again, it could be a friend. It doesn't have to be a romantic partner, but there could be some intensity. But then on the 20th, probably one of the most important days of the whole year, to be honest, because Mars moves out of that 6th house where it's uber practical, can be a bit more self-sacrificing for Mars, because Mars can be about our ego and manifesting our individuality. And Mars has helped you to perhaps get a bit fitter, be more active, but it moves into house 7. And house 7 is relationships. So for the next 6 weeks, things can get really quite exciting, particularly if you're single or you're open to a new alliance. And one of the reasons for this is that Mars links to Pluto in your 3rd house. The 2 rulers of Scorpio are therefore collaborating. So the conversations you had through Pluto's opposition with Venus can be triggered again, but this way in such a hot manner. Mars in a natal chart can be a little problematic if that person doesn't have any balancing influences, and that could make them rather strident in terms of seeing things from their point of view around relationships. But it can definitely be an asset in the sense that giving us a greater strength, a greater need to make sure that our boundaries are clear. So the link with Pluto suggests some very powerful conversations can occur towards the end of this month. But on the 21st, we have the 2nd of the 2 Capricorn full moons. This is all about the ins and outs of money. The last one was not easy because maybe you had a clash a month ago across the 21st or 22nd of June because you couldn't quite agree over the money or over the values or over the exchange of energies or input into a situation. This one I think is blessed with a lot more possibilities because the position of Neptune is actually very helpful and Uranus also is very good. And so if you're open-minded, actually I feel that, and you've worked hard from the last full moon a month ago, this one's going to pass off less eventfully. But then the sun moves on the 22nd into Leo, the sign it rules. It's a brilliant moment for all of us, to be honest. what would we be without the sun? You know, the sun is at the heart of our whole existence. So the sun returning here brings its warmth, it brings its charisma, it brings its flame. But ironically, it evokes the kind of energies that people relate to about your sign. You know, that person who's very experimental, open to new approaches, perhaps, you know, with quite a healthy regard for their knowledge and the information they can share, but certainly a super, and Mars also links brilliantly to the sun. So through the last week of this month, around friendships particularly, or alliances you have with people that you have very similar values, or people you connect to if you are traveling, can prove to be really, really stimulating. But the sun does go opposite Pluto. So you can see that Pluto boshes Mercury, Venus and the sun in turn this month. So if we're conscious of the power of Pluto, Pluto very much to do with transforming your thinking, your immediate environment, your connection to your neighborhood, to your siblings, to your ideas, to technology. All of those things are really being lit up by Pluto. But then Pluto opposite the sun, the third house can be our everyday patterns. The ninth house is where we want to open things up. Again, the potential for quite an intense debate, maybe even a disagreement, to be honest, but also the chance to have an exciting, very, very charismatic, electric connection to someone that's highly charged, but, you know, really will make you feel alive. Then on the 25th, Mercury moves out of the sign of Leo and into your 10th house, which is very much to do with work. And of course, Virgo can be very much to do with discrimination, detailing, efficiencies. And if the desire to break out and do something different is to do with your professional situation, then that Mercury move is going to see you wanting to put a lot of energy at the end of this month into trying to reach the people that can be significant for your goals and ambitions. But then on the 26th, Chiron goes into a retrograde, which will last through to the 26th of December. Chiron in Aries, very much about identity. For you, the 5th house, very much about showcasing your superpower around creativity, flair and passion. But also, if you don't feel seen or heard romantically, the 5th house, that and the North Node being there through to the early part of January next year is an opportunity to revisit and work hard and find in the furnace Aries and the self-belief to be more experimental and even risk-taking. The 5th house very much to do with speculation. I'm not saying that you should risk things that you can't afford to lose, but certainly in life sometimes we have to give a bit to get a bit. It's almost like a football coach who attacks all out. You might concede goals, but you'll more likely score more. If you just sit and be defensive, you get very stale outcomes. So this is a month that as it goes on, the transformation which is possible at the start of the month can start to go at such a pace, and things can move almost like a galloping horse. It's going to get really exciting, so do buckle up. But one thing I can guarantee you, it's not going to be dull. And if you're all in and it's working well, there's so much you can get going at the start of this month. But if you're wanting to break out and do something much more individual as the month goes on, that's there for you as well. If you want to stay all in but change things up around your work, that opportunity manifests itself as the month comes to a close. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Have a great month, and if you've yet to do so, please do click that subscription button.